Welcome back to Scratch That Itch, where curiosity makes us tick. If you're here, you should know this is a continuation of an amazing conversation that we've had before. There's a part one where we talk about designing for education with Sandeep Rai. And if you haven't already, you should go and watch that. And if you have, go ahead and enjoy this. I think something that really stands out to me in all of these is being able to ask the right questions, especially even, when it comes to design or whether the first 3 points that you mentioned, it was just asking the right question that sort of leads you a little ahead, which is lovely. We've now, we've spoken of education as a whole. I want to focus on one aspect of it, which is knowledge or information. Even though traditional schools have stayed static, right now we see such a rise in terms of the platforms that are available where anybody could just go and learn about something. You have things like YouTube, you have platforms like Skillshare, Coursera. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that is bridging any sort of gap, or what is the role that they are playing in the educational industry today?
Technology has the potential to play a very disruptive role in the future of education. There's no doubt about that. Right now, the technology is just not in a state where it can cater to all kids. Do I think it could get there in the next 10 or 15 years? Potentially. It's catering right now. Technology alone is catering to one archetype of a child. And that archetype has three big characteristics, right? They are self interested, right? So they're actually highly interested, right? They're usually self-driven, so they're more autonomous, right? So they have high levels of motivation, they have high levels of autonomy, and they're usually highly skilled. And because they're literate and they're above levels, they're able to access the internet and technology in ways that are huge, right? That archetype of kids is probably 25% of kids. Gone are the days where we should walk into any classroom and see a teacher in front of a classroom just delivering a lecture. Right now you should be able to access videos and things that are most 9 times out of 10 much more engaging than that teacher would be, and actually would cut down the preparation time of that teacher significantly to try to even match that engagement level. Those days should be long behind us, right? And then I think it can also just play a role in being able to extend the instructional day. And I think that's really important because the average Indian child is not in school for that long per day. And technology can actually play a role to say, how do you just keep learning happening all the time, right? And that's where the world is moving towards right now. We're moving past a world where we will choose one career and we will be in that career for the rest of our lives, right? That time is gone. Technology enables you to do that, right? If I want to switch to a different industry, I'm able to basically go and get the skills and reinvent myself to be able to do so. And I think can it now do that within schools as well?
I think just the idea of going to school, especially the traditional school, for the rest of my life could be a little overwhelming. But for sure, I think we have to come up with ways that is enabling us.
But precisely, Ankita, right? And that's because by and large, most people, we look at school like it's cough syrup, right? We look at school and we're I just have to drink it. It tastes awful, but I'm just going to keep drinking it because I know it's going to promise me future opportunity, right? And we're just I'm going to get it done with. And everybody's told us that if you drink enough of this cough syrup, eventually you're going to have good things happen to you one day. But think about this, what if it didn't taste so bad, right? If it didn't taste so bad, then actually you would be wanting to engage with it. And the truth is that you are probably engaging with learning all the time. You're using technology. Most people are taking courses here and there. They're basically learning new tools online as they need them to. Schools need to move in that direction where they taste less like bad tasting cough syrup and they're much more accessible to be able to support frequent reinventions.
Yeah, making learning sound fun. And I completely agree. I think everybody is adapting. Even I am still learning. I have my methods. I resort to reading to learn new things or just research as one of the primary methods. So if it was incorporated and there was a structure to it, it would be so much more easier for me at this point.
Yeah, true. Very, very true.
We've spoken of blended learning, which is sort of merging technology and in person teaching. There's another concept also, which is heavily advocated from design, which is co creation. So, how does that really apply to the education system? What are some important stakeholders that we should consider while we are designing for education?
Pick an industry. It's almost unheard of that like customer engagement and conversations with customer to gauge their needs and desires like would not play a major role in shaping how you think about design and strategy. And yet in education, like the truth is that like we rarely ask kids what they want and need. And the truth is that we rarely ask families what they want and need before designing. We'll try to engage families and invest families in the process, right? That I think a lot of schools do. But we rarely actually sit down and say, like, what do you want for your kids? And what do you hope like school does for your kids? And can we design around that? Like, can we actually hold the pen together as we are designing and start to engage in what that means?
And if I were to extend this conversation, we've spoken of so many concepts that actually need to be included in the 21st century learning. I know Circle's doing some amazing work there. So, what is your approach like? How have we included all of this? And what exactly at this point are we trying to enable using Circle?
We believe in a couple of things. One is we want to see a world that in a country that is free of poverty and that is filled with love. Like that is ultimately what we are trying to basically build. And to do so, we're trying to say, could we actually build a network of schools, after school centers, teachers that are trying to reinvent and reimagine what education could be? And we have these four big beliefs that like underlie everything that we do at the Circle, right? One of those is we just believe education holds game changing power for kids. Education has the potential to be able to help kids climb their way out of poverty if given the right set of resources and given the right set of conditions. And the second big belief that we have is that schools just have to be reinvented. Like we have to reinvent schools so that they are doing two things much better. One, they need to basically be brought into the 21st century. Like schools cannot be serving kids for an India that exists in the 1970s. Schools have to be serving kids and preparing kids for the future and not for the past. And the second is that schools need to be reinvented so that they work for all kids. Right? Schools were not designed to work for all kids. Schools, truthfully, were designed to be a natural filtration system, right? To be able to segregate kids so that the most successful and the quote unquote smartest kids made it through, succeeded, got to basically high levels, and the other ones basically got to where society felt like they deserved to be. And the third big belief that we have is that we need to widen the canvas. So kids in India are in school on average for 4.5 hours a day. That's it, right? It's one of the lowest in the world. And when you do the math on that, and you ask yourself what percentage of kids' waking hours are they actually spending in school, forget the time that they're asleep, what you discover is that kids are only spending 11% of their time inside of a school building in a given year. And I just want to let that sit in for a second, right? That means that kids are actually spending 89% of their waking hours in India outside of a school. And yet, like, we're just basically all saying, like, learning should only be happening within that 11%, right? And when I tell most people this, and I'm like, actually, like, no, but we need to extend the canvas. And what if learning could happen all of kids' waking hours? And what if we could think about designing around the 89%? Most people actually say what you said a few minutes ago, because they're like, that would be overwhelming. Like, kids need balance. Why would you want to bore kids? But my response to that is that underlying that is this belief that all of us have, which is that school tastes like bad tasting cough syrup. And like, if we could change that, then actually, like, would we be more willing to engage with the 89%? Would we be more willing to redesign the infrastructure of learning so that it's not this like building that you go to for 4.5 hours a day, but you are learning throughout the day. And there is an infrastructure to support that. And you are having fun with it, so you feel like you are living a balanced life. And the fourth big belief that we have is that, as I mentioned earlier, like we believe that we are living in a world that like needs us to be thinking about how to make it fundamentally better. Like we are solving problems that feel complex from climate and poverty and discrimination. And to be able to basically solve the world's most complex problems, we need to equip kids to be change makers. Like kids have to be part of the solution and not the recipients.
Yeah. I think I want to touch upon the third point majorly because, like you rightly said, 89% of our learning is happening beyond school. So, how do you again solve for something like that? Does that involve parents being included in the sort of learning process, or is it again the after hours bit that you were talking? How do you make sure that this 100% of the time you're able to provide an environment where they're learning? Because beyond that 11%, you have very little control. So how do you sort of even design for something like that and yeah, touch upon that?
I think there are a couple of key solutions. One is, can you extend the learning day? And can the learning day actually be extended beyond 4.5 hours for a school? Two is like, can you create a proliferation of after school programs, like services that are catering to kids after schools, mentors, volunteers, things that are just working around kids, right? The third is technology. And that's where I think actually technology just holds a lot of potential. Like, can technology hold potential for remediation programs to be able to extend access for kids, right? But underlying all of that, like none of that starts unless we actually start to reimagine and rethink how we think about the learning.
That makes so much sense. And I'd love for you to expand on, how are we delivering these four values? You've spoken about the third one, but the others as well via circle.
One is what we're building at our core is we're building an incubation. And so we're trying to say, can we incubate a small cadre of entrepreneurs every single year who want to reinvent what school could be? And so we're actually trying to incubate entrepreneurs every single year who want to build schools that are reinvented versions of what school could be, that are trying to prepare kids for the 21st century. And so we're actually running a 2-year incubation that will teach entrepreneurs how to do 3 big things. How do you design a more innovative school? How do you launch it? And how do you run it? Most Indians, most of us don't look back at our schooling experience and say like, wow, my learning was just mind blowing, right? Like most of us don't look back at our schooling experience and are like, academically, what I learned like unleashed my mind. And it just basically like, and that's sad, right? Because we spend 1/6 of our lives in school. Like, why shouldn't it be mind blowing? And so I think what we've discovered is that like there are people who are coming up and believing that and saying, yes, like we have to reinvent. And so what we're saying, because we realize that what's keeping people from doing that is that people are just like, people are nervous. People are like, but where do I get started? How do I even launch a school? Like, how do I build this? And what we are saying is we will walk that walk with you, right? We will teach you how to design, launch, and run this over the course of 2 years. We've actually just closed our application cycle. We got more than 160 applications. We're working through a lot of that right now to try to select our first cohort. And so we're excited about where that's heading. And the second big thing that we're doing is we're actually running something that we call labs. And labs really is an opportunity for people to be able to get their feet wet. Labs is our opportunity to be able to basically reach out to as many educators and business leaders to try to change the conversation, to try to inspire people, to try to basically help people realize and pick up a vision and conceptualize a vision of what school could be. And so to do that, we're running all sorts of programs. We're doing one-off workshops. We're doing, 5-week starter programs. We're doing continuous engagements. We're doing innovation funding for teachers. We're saying actually we're offering grants that we're about to roll out soon for any teacher that wants to reinvent in their classroom. We're actually basically trying to launch like pilots with kids across the country. This is our means to say like we want to reach as many educators as we can to plant seeds across the country in the hope that will change the conversation and in the hope that will lead to catalytic change. And the third big thing that we're trying to do about 2 years down the line is we're actually trying to build a teacher university. With the belief that actually like you cannot reinvent schools unless you basically take teachers down the reinvention process too.
Again, more power to you. And I can just see the variety of things we're touching upon, from reinventing schools, or, enabling entrepreneurs, to working with teachers and actually giving space for people to experiment. I think, again, one of my favorite part is the space to experiment and actually try new things. I want to go back to one of the new buzzwords that I've been hearing in the education sector, which is social emotional learning. Firstly, what is social emotional learning, and how important is it for us to teach kids about this?
Totally, yeah. So I think there's just been an enormous amount of research done. I mean, some of it's codified in this excellent book written by this guy named Paul Tough called How Children Succeed. Um, and a lot of this learning is actually just telling us that, like, if you look at kids who are succeeding the most, and if you look at kids from under resourced backgrounds in particular that are making their way out of poverty and are starting to find success in a career, like what you are discovering is that kids aren't just possessing content knowledge. But in addition to that, they have this set of characteristics and competencies that are helping them become more emotionally astute human beings, right? And those include things like, you know, do I have grit? Like, do I have perseverance to be able to persevere through challenges? Do I look at life with a sense of optimism? Like, do I have a sense of curiosity? Right? And we've actually codified some of those over the past couple of years to say that like those, what we believe boil down to like this set of competencies and characteristics that we say span things like courage and curiosity and compassion, right? And consciousness. And do I have a collaborative bent, right? To be able to work with others around me. And that's where most of the conversation around socio-emotional has been heading, right? And what we believe is actually that it needs to go beyond that, though. Like it not just needs to be preparing kids to be able to succeed. It needs to be preparing kids with the orientations to be able to build a better world. And we've actually codified that into what we call like all children need to grow up with the commitment to self. I commit to basically nurturing and growing myself and to getting greater opportunity, but I also commit to others as well. And I commit to serving others and to be able to helping others around me. And through that, I commit to building a better India.
This is so intriguing. If we have any sort of curriculum, because here, when you talk about designing for social emotional learning, you're essentially designing for emotions. You're designing for behavior change. So, how do you inculcate courage, or how do you really encourage them to have all of these qualities? And yeah, sort of power through this, or what does a typical curriculum even look like for social emotional learning?
So one is I think gone are the days, or gone should be the days, not gone are the days, but gone should be the days where you walk into schools and you just have a class on values, right? Like it's just proven to be ineffective, right? Like anybody that went to school in the 90s probably experienced that. What does help kids is the question. And the truth is that like it is when it is integrated within class. Like kids need to be doing. If you want kids to be able to create a better world, then they need to be creating a better world now. Like they need to be using school to be able to take on projects, right? Like they need to actually be using school to be able to like build better communities around them. They need to actually be learning about lessons that are teaching them about subjects of poverty and discrimination and all of the issues that we are battling, and then equipping them and to say, what are the solutions that you would devise?
Wow, this actually reminds me of one of the schools I was actually working with in the past. It's an Adam school, and they sort of adhere to similar values. One thing that struck to me was, and they have all UKG, LKG kids majorly that they're working with. So they started this. I don't know if it should be called a subject, but they've introduced this program which has food and gardening. So what they really do is they grow their own vegetables, then take them home, get them back, wash it, care for it, and they actually cook together in the school to learn the value of where it's coming from, or how much even it means for it to be on your plate. And the result was that most of the kids started eating vegetables, at least for that point of time, that they usually wouldn't eat because they'd grown them themselves, which was beautiful to see. Yeah. Now, again, I think we're almost at the end of our segment. Last couple of questions. If any school, or anybody who's in the education sector is watching this, of course, coming up with an entire new school is not a feasible option. But if they were to implement some things immediately, what were some action points that you could give them that they could take away from this video?
One is, can you start engaging with kids and families and start asking kids and families like what they want and need from school, right? Like that would be the biggest starting point that I would say. Um, and two is, can you basically start to expand your vision of what's possible by looking at schools around, by being able to say, can we explore? We at the Circle have a starter program that is open to educators across the country, right? This is a 5-week program. It's an opportunity for people running schools to come in and actually get their feet wet. Join one of those, right? Because what that will do is that will give people like just a set of tools to be able to start working through basically foundational changes that are feasible.
Wow. And again, taking it a little further, now we've spoken of what education looks like for schools and for traditional and formal education up until college, high school. If we were to look at education from a lens where we were designing for specific niche industries, which was future of law, future of medicine, what are your thoughts on that? What should education for these niche industries look like? And what are some values that they should definitely be already incorporating?
One is, I think we have to accept the reality that like change pretty much is the only constant. Like I know it's an overused adage, but like I do think we have to accept the reality that change really is like the only constant that we can embrace. And so to even predict the future of law or the future of medicine, like we're predicting something that will likely continue to change. And so I guess the real question is, how do we equip kids to be able to cope with industries that are going to be frequently changing? And what are the underlying competencies we need to be able to give kids to be able to basically garner and work through that change? I believe that those are things like, to be able to solve complex problems, agility. Like, do I have a sense of purpose? Do I have an orientation to serve the other and not just myself?
I'm down to my last question. This is for anybody who's watching who may not necessarily be in the education sector or social sector. For any everyday people, if they wanted to contribute to you or to your journey to Teach for India or the education sector in general, what are some things that we could do, or how can we really support anybody who's on this journey?
Yeah. For anybody, I would say get proximate, right? That would be like my biggest piece of advice to anybody would be like, I think we have to get proximate to suffering. I think we have to get proximate to poverty. I think we have to get proximate to kids. Because I think when we get proximate enough, when we get on the ground, when we get proximate enough to actually witness it and not talk about it, we are compelled to do something about it. Help us mobilize resources, support, right? Like, help us mobilize the financial resources needed to be able to. So if you're able to donate, then donate. And if you actually can be an advocate, a campaign, like actually like speak out for what kids need, be a voice for kids, right? Do that on social media, do that on print media, do that anywhere actually you possibly can.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. And thank you for being here and making this time. We will we'll have all the amazing links right at the below of everything that Circle and Sandeep is up to at the moment. So you can go check them out, support them, and give them a lot of love. And yeah, meanwhile, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe this video. We'll be back again with more meaningful conversation. Until next time.